Hi, I am responding to our book group 3 prompts about the text Leading with Focus. So for the introduction in chapter 1, we were asked to talk about in what ways does our learning organization focus on Schmoker's essential elements and what evidence do I have to support this. So for all 3 of the elements, the evidence that I have to support it, 2 things. One of them is what our district calls literacy classroom visits, and math classroom visits. They are structured based upon information in the text Literacy Unleashed by Bonnie Hauk and Sandy Novak. And what these are 5-minute brief classroom visits where you have a list of look-fors and you check off all the look-fors that you see. Those look-fors are decided upon their best practices that you would hope to see. So for example, the gradual release of responsibility, peer-to-peer interaction, a learning target or objective is posted, things like that. So that's what we see when we do our literacy classroom visits and our math classroom visits. They are not evaluative at all. The information is not tied to individual teachers, even though that's how we gather the information. We put it all together, and then so there's no teachers' names attached, and it gives us a picture as a school building. Where are we already strongly entrenched with some of those best practices, and where might we need to provide more training, more professional development, or allocate more resources so that teachers are able to successfully do that. So that would be my evidence for where I got this from. So the first essential element is coherent, content-rich curriculum. And I scored our district or our leadership organization as a partial on that. I think our curriculum is really coherent. We have curriculum guides, as was mentioned in the text. Those do not necessarily provide the scope and sequence that Schmoker would be looking for. But in addition to the curriculum guides, we do have unit planners that are created with a district curriculum team of both teachers who volunteer to be on that team and people from the curriculum and instruction department. Those unit planners have information about timing, so how long it should take. Usually it says about 4 to 6 weeks. There are learning targets, there are resources, there are common assessments, all included with those unit planners. So I feel like that is really coherent. The reason I rated it as partial is that I do have some concern about focusing too much on skills-based curriculum rather than rich content curriculum. So we're going to be looking into some of that, I think, more in the coming years, and especially as we work on our ELA standards review next year. Then the next one is traditional literacy tasks and activities. I also scored us a partial there. I think while we're working to ensure that our literacy block is truly balanced, we're noticing some areas that we could strengthen. One of them would be phonics instruction. We've noticed that that's not been implemented with fidelity across the board. We think that a lot of it could be to do with the teachers just aren't certain of how to provide phonics instruction, so we need to simplify that process, and that's why we're doing a phonics pilot of some different instructional materials and training to see how that might go for teachers and what would work best. In addition, we'd like to implement more reading conferences to ensure that students are talking about what they are reading, and a stronger emphasis on writing as well. That's an area where I think we have a lot of opportunity for growth, and our text had mentioned that writing is really an important part of literacy curriculum and being literate. Then third, effective, soundly structured lessons. I gave that a partial as well. And the reason I gave it a partial is that I think a lot of the elements, as I mentioned earlier, are in our lessons. We've got the posted learning targets, we've got gradual release of responsibility, there's teacher modeling. We'd like to see more explicit teacher modeling across the board in our district. So when we put together all that data, not just from the building walkthroughs, but we put all the buildings together then to say as a district, how are we doing? We've noticed that there's a need for some more training and some more practice with explicit modeling and think alouds. Also, the teacher's ongoing attention. I think our text said teachers' close ongoing attention to how many students are succeeding on each step of the lesson. So, for example, We'd like to see more teachers taking anecdotal notes during guided reading. We'd like to see an increase of progress monitoring, so taking running records more often and then analyzing those running records to decide what each student needs and how their instruction can be even more differentiated during small group and during guided reading. So then the next question was, how is focus communicated in our district? And evidence for that based on the 5 steps for focused leadership. So in our district, in some ways we create focus, but in other ways we do not. So the learning priority or focus is communicated each year during the Summer Leadership Academy that takes place in June and August. Principals attend as well as building leaders, so people on the building leadership team, some instructional leaders. And what happens then is based on the priorities that are communicated at the district level, then buildings will take those and put them into their site strategic plans with the SMART goal for how they will achieve those priorities. So in Bloomington, I think we adequately complete step 1, which is to research carefully. We use a lot of research, a lot of evidence-based best practices. But then I think after that step, that's where things fall apart. Step 2 is reducing. We do not reduce other priorities when new priorities are added, and we don't only focus on a few priorities. So instead, I think it often ends up being that we're chasing the carrot of higher test scores. And that's not the teacher's priorities, that's set out by district leadership. But therefore, what ends up happening is that we bounce to the next magic bullet or what's perceived as what will improve test scores, whether it's math or reading. And then I think that what ends up happening is that a lot of other priorities just kind of go away because there's not clear communication about what to reduce and how to do it. And it's not possible to focus on all of the priorities. There's just too many. So as a result, individual buildings and teachers are choosing what to reduce, and then it's not usually uniform across the district. So I think it would be really helpful if we were more direct and explicit about what things should be reduced and make sure we do that when we're adding other things. Step 3, our communication is clear, but because we don't focus on just a few key priorities with kind of the hedgehog focus, teachers don't have piercing clarity around the priorities. So by not addressing just a few, and I would go with 3, like Schmoker suggests, we don't have the chance to continually practice and to really master what we're hoping to achieve. So as a result, we often don't get the impact that we're hoping for or what we anticipate would happen with these changes because teachers don't have the opportunity to reach mastery. And then last, and linked to all of this, we don't have enough opportunity to monitor and respond. So in my mind, that means when teachers really have the chance to reflect and adjust their instruction and to continually refine that instruction so that they reach mastery. And if we're not staying focused on, 3 straight up hedgehog priorities, we don't have the opportunity to continually focus, refine, and achieve mastery so that we get the impact we're expecting. So to accomplish this goal, I would select 3 priorities to focus on, as Schmoker had indicated. I'd use evidence from researchers as well as our own district evidence, performance indicators, student proficiency levels, all of those things to select which priorities we should be focusing on. And I would ensure that my 3 priorities fall under the designated areas selected by Schmoker, so curriculum, literacy, or instruction. And then as I thought more about it too and kind of wrote up notes for my response to the next question, I think I would select only one of those to begin with and really get solid and then move into the other ones. So that brings me to the next part. Choose one priority, one element to focus on, and describe how I would create the focus on that element for my school, unit, or program. So I'm going to say school because I'm going for K-12 principal. I'd be pretty tempted to focus on literacy because that is my area of expertise. I spent a lot of time working on that as a literacy coach. But after reading our texts, I would first focus on instruction. So it really seems clear to me based on the research that was quoted in the text from experts like Marzano and Hattie that starting with instruction is going to make the biggest impact for our students in a short amount of time. So the way that I would do that is I'd work to deliver training first to ensure that all teachers have the same understanding of each required element of instruction. The reason I would do that is, just like the text mentions, teachers have varied understandings of what is curriculum. And when you say that, what does that mean? What is literacy? So I want to make sure we are all on the same page, that we all have the same understanding. And I think the best way to do that is to start with training. But in that training, what would be modeled are those same elements that we would hope to see in teachers' instruction. So for example, it would start with clear learning objectives or learning targets. We would use the gradual release of responsibility. We would be modeling. And I do think Bloomington does a really good job of that. In professional development, we are constantly modeling what we are asking teachers to do with the professional development and training that we are providing. With that, it wouldn't be me as a building leader doing all of this. I envision that I would set the stage as far as the why, and why the teachers should be on board with this, why they should change. And then really what it would be is it would be other teacher leaders in the building who would be providing the training and modeling best practice for each element of the instruction. So for some teachers, they may be thinking, I know this is obvious, why are we spending time on this? But just like the example of Coach, I think it's Wooden or in the text, it might seem repetitious or obvious or not exciting, but we're focusing on the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are going to make the biggest difference. And once we achieve that, then we can look at creativity and other things. But I do think that it's really important for a building leader to set the tone with clear communication and clear expectations so that teachers know exactly what is going to be expected of them, and also that accountability piece will be there. So what I'm thinking about here is in the text, part of it, I think it's on page 23, the text says, what gets measured and monitored gets done. And I actually remember one of my building principals, a former principal I had, would say that to us, and it was really true. Whether people like to hear it or not, that was absolutely the truth. So what I would envision happening then is after this first training and kind of level setting, so we're all on the same page, that would be followed up. As a building leader, I would support implementation and mastery with, ideally if I had the funds for it, an instructional coach. I'd also implement something similar to Bloomington's literacy classroom visits, where there would be brief walkthroughs and look-fors, and then that information would be put all together so that it's not evaluative, it's not based on one particular teacher, but we would get a picture at the building level of how are we doing on this? Where do we need to provide more support, more training, allocate more resources? And then that would also have in place the continual work to master those elements of instruction. In addition, I would also make sure that our building PLCs are focused on that instruction so that teachers are working as teams to implement all of those different pieces. I would like to offer opportunities for teachers to observe their peers and to take turns. So I know that as literacy coaches, we were able to do that. The building prioritized peer observations. So we would have someone else, an administrator, cover a teacher's classroom so that they could go observe a peer and learn from their peers, and vice versa. And I think that I've had that experience as a teacher, being able to go and see my peers, and it was such a powerful experience. It was absolutely, I think, some of the best training that I ever had. That coupled with a PLC that is really dedicated and genuinely focused on their goal. So those are the ways that I would attack the elements of instruction just starting off. Another thing that I can recall my recent building principal would do is that she required all probationary teachers to submit lesson plans. And I know that they didn't love it, but I think it was effective. And I think that I would consider doing that with the instructional elements that are outlined here in Schmoker's text. So making sure that there's the learning objective or target, there's the anticipatory set, the gradual release of responsibility, so that all of those pieces I'm seeing those every week from my probationary teachers. And then I also am very keenly aware of what I should be seeing when I go into a classroom. So again, like some of our texts have mentioned, then monitoring does not become a gotcha moment. It just becomes an opportunity for teachers to show what they're doing and what their students are learning. And it's no big surprise. I think that covers my thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah.